As a proud alumna of Ashoka University, it's a privilege for me to invite Mr. Ashish Dhawan, who will shed light on System Orchestrators, a new archetype to work at scale. Let's give a big round of applause to Ashish.
Thank you. It's been just over a decade since I switched over from the corporate world to social sector and philanthropy, and I'm still on a learning journey. But two things struck me early on and still sort of have been in my head, and I thought I wanted to share them with you and expand on them. One is the idea of what I call the missing middle, and a second is this false dichotomy between growth and development. So what is the missing middle? I mean, I was really nervous about switching out of the corporate world because I had a certain set of skills. I knew I couldn't work in the field. I knew I'd be frustrated in a think tank in just the world of ideas. And so it was very real for me. And I think that missing middle in India is we have hundreds of thousands, maybe a couple of million of non-profits that work on the ground, that are very, very good at connecting with communities, that are innovative. And then we have a set of people who live in the world of ideas, you know, think tanks and policymakers, etc. But the missing middle are really people who can learn from the ground, but can figure out how, you know, those ideas from the ground, methods can work systemically, and at the same time, take the big ideas and see how to prioritize as well. Now, government does this all day long. And government in India, of course, has increased its budget for the social sector from 9+ crore in FY16 to about 23 lakh crore. So from 9 lakh crore to 23 lakh crore. So big commitment in terms of money. But there's so many priorities within government that need to be filled. And I think from the outside, one role that can be played by these people in the missing middle, and I call them system orchestrators, is really to work in partnership with government to see how we can develop, make India develop faster and in a more appropriate fashion. So let me give you an example. In education, for instance, Room to Read did this brilliant pilot in Bharwani district in Madhya Pradesh, tribal district in Madhya Pradesh, stunning results. In the treatment group, children were reading at the end of class 2 at 28 words per minute. In the control group, they were reading at less than half that. Stunning results. Nobody seemed to notice. The government of Madhya Pradesh was oblivious to this. Room to Read somehow wasn't able to communicate this to the government of Madhya Pradesh. So you had a situation here where under your nose, you had somebody who'd shown you stunning results using something called structured pedagogy in terms of improving foundational literacy and numeracy, and yet it wasn't translating. And that's when I realized it's really a different muscle. NGOs are very good at what they do. They may not have the muscle to either be able to demonstrate at scale. Sometimes NGOs have an over-resourced model that can't work at scale. So you need to figure out a way to create the demo right, build the evidence, advocate for it, and then work on policy implementation. And that's really what I mean by that missing middle. And you see it time and time again where there's this innovation, it's working, but somehow it isn't scaling. Obviously, some of them government finds and government adopts, but we need more of these organizations. I think the good news is organizations in India are starting to think about it. So Akshay Patra, which started 20+ years ago, has gone from 0 to about 2 million meals a day, and they do it very well. The question that was always on my mind, and I always used to ask them, but what do you do systemically? You run your own kitchens, you run your own delivery. There are 100+ million, 110 million meals being delivered in India. How are you impacting the system? And I think now they're finally looking at setting up an institute for hunger that would actually take that know-how and find a way to work on it systemically. FES did the same. You know, they were working in what we think of as sort of wasteland, which is really the commons. and looking at how to revive them, but also for it to generate livelihoods. And they learned how to work systemically. I think Pradhan has done this quite recently in terms of leveraging the Manrega funds for water security. So some of the NGOs from the bottom have learned how to build this muscle and are starting to do this. But I still think we are in the early beginnings of this. I think all of us need to think about how we populate this missing middle across different sectors, how these people can learn from each other, and how we can also figure out a more appropriate way to work with government. Because government obviously is the scale actor. It's the one with the power that can do everything. I think government sometimes also treats people on the other side as order takers. So I think government has to sometimes realize that these are people who are technical experts, who can really deliver and work with them. I don't mean all. I know a couple of people in government are smiling. But I mean that it will require a different sort of partnership to really make this work. I think it's changed a lot. Government has been much more open in the last few years, and many actors have worked across different areas. But I think if we can make this work, given the amount of money government is spending, given the intent, given the capacity in the social sector, if we can populate this missing middle and build this right partnership model, I think lots can be done. I'll come to my point on this dilemma between growth and development. Again, I was a private equity person, invested in companies, always thought about economic growth. And then I came into this social sector and started to only think about development, education, and health, and things like that. And honestly, it's a false dichotomy. I think more of us in philanthropy or in the social sector, even though we work in development, need to think about economic growth. At least that's been my realization. Not enough philanthropy thinks about economic growth, because at the end of the day, the research shows that as you go up to about $40,000 of per capita income in PPP terms, India is about 8,200 today. So till we don't get to 5x where we are today, human development has about 90% correlation with per capita income. After that, it starts to plateau. But there's a 90% correlation. So thinking about the levers of economic growth, which is things like jobs, infrastructure, trade, financing, I don't think some policy think tanks may do a little bit of work, but there isn't enough that's done from the outside to work in partnership with government in these areas. And I think ultimately it's economic growth that will lead to development. Of course, the social sector plays a big role along with government in ensuring that it's inclusive development and sustainable development. So those are just the two ideas I want to leave you with, is the missing middle, how do we get more system orchestrators in India? And the second idea of how do we get more philanthropy to focus on economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you for making us see how economic growth and social development can go hand in hand.